All right. My name is Ben Burgess.
My name's Jen Burgess.
This is the third installment in our No Politics Philosophy Friday live stream series.
And I just want to say that you can absolutely ship Ben and Ryan Lake if you want to.
Good God. All right.
There have been times that I have shipped Ben and Ryan.
Why would you say that?
Well, that was before we got together.
So what are we going to talk about today?
The Ship of Theseus.
So
everybody's favorite ship.
This is I think this is something that since they mentioned it in the last episode of WandaVision, and I think when it was over, I was like, hey, let's do that next week for the
little light bulb went on over our heads.
The Philosophy Friday series. So, and this varies it up a little bit because the first two were about ethics. Might do a little philosophy of language later on, but right now going to do some metaphysics. So, doing a little tour of the areas of philosophy.
That was something that I always avoided because in all levels of philosophy, for some reason, I don't know why. Ben, if you know, you can say. Metaphysics and epistemology were always paired, and you had to do one or the other. You could do both, but you had to do at least one or the other, and I always did epistemology. So I had a lot of epistemology classes, never had to take a metaphysics.
Yeah, people always sort of think of like analytic philosophers will say M&E for metaphysics and epistemology, and so
we're cool.
Yeah, and then so sometimes for like a graduate program or something, you might have to take like at least one class in a bunch of different areas, and one of them would be metaphysics and epistemology. So for your M&E class, you would take epistemology.
At all 3 degree levels, yes.
Yeah. I actually took a bunch of metaphysics in my master's program because was studying with Quentin Smith, and that's what he did. So did a bunch of time stuff, and that was always really interesting, at least to me. That's always what I was really into, and I sort of got diverted from like the metaphysics of time to Phil of logic, when I went from the master's to the PhD. But
I'll think about it.
So not just like Mark.
Well, Mark's if you're unavailable, so is Mark.
Oh, fair enough. So yeah, I spent a fair amount of time on stuff like this. Always liked it. But even I think people who weren't super into metaphysics, I think what we're going to at least start today by talking about the Ship of Theseus. This is the Ship of Theseus and Personal Identity Part 1. The reason it's Part 1 is that I am going to have to be elsewhere by 8. Have another engagement for
which is more important than his wife. So maybe I do ship Ben and Ryan. And Ryan, I know who I ship you with, but I'm not going to say here, but you know who it is.
Yeah. Well, so somebody asked in the chat, which vision is the real vision, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you'd be thinking about when you're thinking about personal identity. And so personal identity in this context, again, we'll do the Ship of Theseus, we'll introduce the personal identity stuff, then you can, marinate on it for a week, and we'll do a fuller version next Friday.
When Ben will not have any place else to be.
So, yeah, actually that'd be fun. You should come talk to patrons sometime, and maybe we can do the trolley stuff then. But
I don't do politics.
Yeah, but if you want her to come on to talk about trolleys, she'll do that.
I can do that.
Yep. So
you know who?
So
the 4th member of the Yard House gang.
Alrighty then.
It's a chat group.
In any case, that's So what we mean by personal identity in the context of like analytic philosophy is a little bit different from what we mean in other contexts, right? So I think sometimes you might hear that phrase and you might think about like your sense of identity or something like that. And that's not at least directly relevant to what we're talking about here, which is just a person who exists at time one, or I don't know, for some weird reason, philosophers always say time T1.
Time T.
Yeah. And well, if you're going to do two, it should be T1 and T2. So a person who exists.
Yeah, but you start at T.
Time T, and a person who exists at time T1. If they're the same person or not, right? That's what you're talking about. We're talking about
what makes Ben today the same as Ben tomorrow,
right? And you think about all the different ways, things that could happen to me, and you say, okay, would that still be the same person? And again, even that sounds sort of metaphorical. Like, you know, people say things like, oh, I'm not the same person today that I was back then. But in this context, we mean it literally, right? You know, what makes you literally the same person? And if you don't really see how the problem would come up, hey, good news, we'll get to it. But there are a whole bunch of problems about that, but as a sort of training wheels thing to think about before thinking about identity problems for people, it's useful to do one just
that's easier.
Yeah, that's easier. That's just about inanimate objects.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the last thing to say before I throw to you to
oh, are you throwing to me?
I was gonna. Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
All right.
I was just wondering if that was going to happen or what.
You said you weren't going to do that. So, is that there are a couple, when we say identity, there are a couple different things that you could mean by that. So one of them is qualitative identity, and the other is numerical identity. So,
oh, did you want me to explain the different kinds of identity?
Go nuts.
Okay, so let's say that I drive a 2016, what's that kind of car?
Ford Escape.
A 2016, is that what we have?
Yes.
That is what we have. I don't know much about cars. I drive a blue 2016 Ford Escape, and my friend Susanna drives a 2016 blue Ford Escape. You might say we drive the same car. Well, yeah, there's a sense in which we drive the same car. Is our car 2016?
No, it's 2012.
Okay. Or you could say I drive a 2012 blue Ford Escape. Ben does too. We drive the same car. So you could say of me and Susanna, we drive the same car and it means one thing. And Ben and I, we drive the same car and it means something completely different. So we're talking about the kind of identity that is Ben and me driving the same car. It's not just alike in all its features. It is one and the same car. My car, Ben's car, same car.
Yeah. So if Jen and Susanna, you know, like, yeah, you might say, oh, I drive the same car, but you know, it's not like, oh, so we're driving around the same car. That's why sometimes I find it in places I don't remember parking.
Exactly.
You know, that would be numerical identity. So numerical identity is it's the same one of. Qualitative identity is just maybe it has a bunch of qualities in common.
Except Susanna is much cooler than we are, and she has a cute little red car. So
okay. So
love you, Suze.
So when we're thinking about identity, when we start talking about the Ship of Theseus, we mean numerical identity, being the same one of. So it's the sense in which, you know, when you say is, then it's, you know, if you say Batman is Bruce Wayne, right? You know, it's that sense of is, that they're the same individual.
Exactly. I use Mark Twain and Samuel Clemens.
Okay, well, that's much classier. We also established that the other night when we were talking this through that in your classes, when you talk about John Locke's example about the Prince and the Pauper, I reference Freaky Friday. So, you generally go for a classier grade of examples than I do.
I do. I believe in my students that they can follow these things, that they know who Mark Twain is, and not just Batman.
Well, but it's not that I don't think they could follow it. It's just more fun to use Batman.
But I tell them anything that's true of Samuel Clemens is also true of Mark Twain. You can't have something that's true of one and not true of the other.
Yeah, so
because they are one and the same thing.
Yeah, and there are, if you think about that principle that about how if two things are identical, then they'll have all of their qualities in common, and trying to figure out what that means. There's a whole, I think, multiple cans of worms that are opened by that. But maybe we can get into all that in part 2. But right now, let's talk about the Ship of Theseus. And no, Ian, we have not done the teleporter yet, but we will totally get there. Probably tonight.
And you, yes.
So
I know who you are.
So in any case, so Ship of Theseus, this is a example that comes, so it's an ancient Greek example, and
hence the name Theseus.
Yes. So you imagine a ship with,
hence the name. Go on.
You can stop doing that. So, nice. Person says they know who Mark Twain is because there's a Star Trek episode where Data goes back in time to meet him. Say this is a person who would enjoy my class more than Jen's class.
Hey!
So, but
I am in my class. That's the difference.
So you imagine a ship which has
not a Star Trek ship.
Yeah, just the boring kind of ship that goes on the water, and it has someone somewhere. I was just thinking must have done like a science fiction short story called The Starship of Theseus. If not, that's a free idea. Just go for it. But in any case, so the ship is made of 365 planks, and sometimes, and we'll just say planks for the sake of simplicity, but sometimes it's a little bit like we were talking about the trolley problem, that sometimes people hear it for the first time and they'll be like, wait a second, but maybe you can get to the tracks really quick and warn them and get them off, before. And so they'll try to lawyer the example that way. The same way every once in a while with the Ship of Theseus, I found people will do okay, what about the sails? What about the nails?
I have never had a student say this.
Okay, well, mine are much more creative than yours, apparently. But, yeah, but
mine are too busy reading classic literature.
Yeah, see, mine, since I only reference pop culture, are freed up to think about these complicated objections. So, if that's what you're,
the ship is entirely made of wooden planks.
Yeah, for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to say plagues, but let's just say 365 components, but it sounds silly to say components every time.
It does.
So we'll just say planks.
Planks.
So there are 365 planks. And every day,
for a year,
you take away one of the planks. So maybe somebody, I like to think of the ship as being... Oh,
you're going to go into some detail, aren't you?
I am. It's way more fun this way.
Tell a story.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I'm trying to make it vivid and entertaining, and not just make highfalutin literary references. There are. So yeah, I kind of think of the ship as being actually sailing while this is going on. Every day, a little rowboat, comes up to the ship. Guy comes out of the little rowboat. He boards the ship. He yanks out one of the planks.
You might think of it this way, but this isn't the actual story.
Yeah. Okay.
The actual
my turn. So they have he takes out.
This is how he treats me.
Takes out one of the planks and he replaces it with a new plank. So this happens every single day for a year, such that at the end of the first day, there are 364 old planks and one new one. At the end of the first week, there are 358 old planks and 7 new ones.
Good math.
I'm very proud of myself. End of the first month, there are 335 old planks and 30 new ones. End of the first year, there are 365 new planks and 0 old ones. So the obvious question is
this the ship of Theseus?
Yeah, is the ship floating around
in the harbor where it has been this whole time
in distant seas
because people are saving it because of their love of Theseus? They are what's the word?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, like where you know, like whatever, like in a museum, like curating it, or that's not the word. Whatever, it starts with P. Preserving it. They are preserving it. Because of their great adoration for Theseus. And when the planks rot, they replace it. And there's no, one every day for a year or anything. It's just, from time to time, they have to replace a rotting plank.
Yeah, so
that's the real story.
Switching it to the more fun one than I did. Now the question is the ship sailing distant oceans at the end of the year that has all new planks? Mm-hmm. Is this, remember, we're not asking if it's the same ship in that sense that Jen and Susanna might drive the same car. We're asking if it's numerically the same ship, if it's like the same one.
We drive the same car.
Right. So like if, Theseus demands the ship back.
Yeah. If Theseus comes back and he's like, yo, man, where's my ship? Is he entitled to this ship? Is that his ship? I don't know why we don't just call it Theseus's ship instead of the ship of Theseus, but
sounds better. So, no,
it's Theseus's ship. Well, at least at the beginning, it's not the worker's ship.
Yeah. Although maybe there is a scenario where they control it. Something I found out a couple months ago that I really got a big kick out of is that, thousands of years after this example, but that pirate ships were technically floating worker cooperatives. The pirates would elect the captain. So maybe that happens at some point in this story. But in any case, I
may need a second class before this hour is up.
So is this the same ship at the end of the year? Yes or no? And
that is the question.
And then the second question, which is also interesting, is if not, when does it stop being the original ship?
Because if it was Theseus's ship, and then it's not Theseus's ship, there was a turnover point. What was it?
Yeah. So is like,
I guess your example works out well if there are 365 planks because there's an odd number.
Right. So if your position is that it's 181 planks, you could, yeah. No, 183 planks.
His mom was a math professor.
I know she's going to be so ashamed when she goes back and watching this. I think she's not watching live though, maybe so we can edit that. Yeah. So if you think like half plus one, I guess, then that'll be 183 planks. That feels a little weird and arbitrary. Like if it's 182 planks, it's still the Ship of Theseus. And if it's 183 new planks, it's not anymore. I mean, that feels like a funny thing to say.
Or what if you had, like I said, in the original example, there was no number. So what if it was an even number of planks and at one point it was 50-50?
Right. Yeah. So this is tricky. And I think that like one of the things that makes it tricky is that even in Joshua,
nice of you to join us.
Yeah. And sometimes people will sort of cast it around for something to say about this. Will be like, oh, the first time you replace a plank, it's not the Ship of Theseus anymore. But that's a really weird standard.
It is, because let's say you take your car into the mechanic and they replace one spark plug. Is this no longer the car of Bob?
Right.
That seems like a weird thing to say. You know, you come back to get your car and they tell you, oh, we replaced the spark plug. And you're, oh, wait, that's not my car.
Yeah. And, or, you know, if you take, you know, yeah. I mean, if Bob loads his car to Jim and while Jim is driving it, it gets a flat tire. And so, of course, he replaces it. Then Bob comes back at the end of the weekend and says, hey, dude, where's my car? Would Jim be entitled to say, what are you talking about? This is a different car. Like that, again, would be a very strange thing to say. And you could all
not a very good friend.
that too. But you could, and there's also, I mean, I think one way of thinking about what makes this tricky to think about is that on the one hand, like if you did this all in a day, I think we would clearly think that this is a replacement ship, right? That you,
or yeah, if you took your car to the mechanic and you come back and they say, well, we replaced every component of your car, but we did it one at a time. You know, we took out one spark plug, we put it in a different one. We took out another spark plug, we put it, you know, and we did one piece at a time. But here's your car. Is that your car?
Yeah.
Even if they replaced it with identical pieces, does it still seem like, is that the car you took in?
Yeah, I mean, if they just said, oh, we replaced the engines, we replaced the seats, we replaced, you know, engines. We replaced the engine, we replaced the seats, we replaced
he doesn't know much about cars
the door,
either.
we replaced the alternator,
Let's get some more car parts. The glove compartment.
No, I mean, I do actually know a lot about the inside of cars because I've had so many things go wrong with them. But,
I have a father.
So
that's what I have.
So Jen knows nothing about this because she hasn't had a series of mechanics telling her, you know, what has to be replaced.
No, I have a father.
You know,
not that Ben doesn't have a father, but it's different for girls.
In any case, replaced the belts, we replaced the seat covers, we replaced the steering wheel, etc. At a certain point, it's like feels like a Monty Python bit or something. You'd say like, "Wait, are you just telling me that you gave me a new car?" Because it sounds like you're just telling me you gave me a new car. So we would, yeah, the Johnny Cash song, exactly.
But then, if this happened over a series of years, you know, and even if there was more than one thing replaced at a time, you know, all of your spark plugs were replaced at once, all of your tires were replaced at once. If this went on for many years, would there ever be a point when you're like, wait, this is no longer my car? Or once everything got replaced, would you still think of it as your car? Would it be weird to come pick it up from the mechanic and be like, no, I'm not, for that person, and be like, you know, this is just not my car anymore.
Yeah. Or
so time definitely intuitively plays a role.
Yeah, because if you think about like your hand, say, okay, here's my left hand. It has if my hand was chopped off, but then there was some amazing science fiction thing that could happen where they could they could just harvest some cells from somewhere else in my body and just grow me an entirely new hand that was indistinguishable superficially from the old hand, that had, you know, that function, you know, just the same way, all
better
that
have
stuff.
That same ring on it. That's all I got to say about it.
Then we would say, oh, Ben has a new hand. But if, on the other hand, like every cell in that hand, as is my understanding, dies and is replaced just automatically in the normal course of things every 7 years.
That's what people say. I that's not really
Okay, even within the hand,
but that's what people say. All the cells in your body are replaced every 7 years.
I know that's not entirely true.
Yeah,
but that's why I was saying the hand thing, because I thought that the sense in which it wasn't entirely true is that there are like not every cell in your brain is replaced every 7 years.
Yeah, it has something to do with brain cells.
Yeah, so I think for the hand, it actually is true that like every cell in your hand, like, you know.
But is it exactly 7 years? Like, do you wake up on 7 years in one day and you're like, it's a whole new hand?
Well, you don't, but that's my point, right? So assuming that it is about 7 years, that like every cell in your hand has been replaced, you would not say it's a new hand. Like clearly, I think of this hand as being a hand that I have always had, and will, I hope, have for the rest of my life. I don't think.
If you lose that hand, you better make sure you get the ring.
Oh my God! So
you can put it on your new hand.
Yeah. So this is really hard. Granted, I think you could say that maybe you think that it's not the same ship at the end of the year, and it's maybe not that bad if you don't have a precise cutoff point. I saw Oliver in the chat definitely get some extra credit points for this in pretending this is graded. Because
you mean it's not?
Because he brought up the grades will be assigned at the end of this stream. Because he brought up the Sorites paradox, which is the one about the original version. Since Jen is going to snoodily insist on all the original versions of these things, is about putting rocks together and how many stones it takes to make a heap of stones.
Sand.
I thought the original was about stones.
Ryan.
Okay, Ryan, tell us if the original is about stones, because I think the sand thing is actually a little bit like, I like that a little bit better, but I thought the original thing was about stones.
Oh. Yeah, I don't think so. I always show this video of Ben and Ryan describing it.
Yeah.
Actually, when we do this in my classes, and my students always, like, as soon as they, Ben talks for a little bit and then throws it over to Ryan. Ryan starts talking. Ben picks up a beer, and the students all find that hilarious. Yeah, exactly. But it was a bottle.
Yeah,
everybody loves that.
Yeah, that's a video that Ryan and I did for Zero Books back in fall of 2019, I want to say.
And he says in the video, which is so funny, he says in the video, well, Ryan knows a lot about Greece and Greek philosophy and whatever, so I thought I would have him on today. Like, this was some premeditated thing. And actually what happened is that we were all going out to dinner or going to a movie or something, and Ryan had come over, and Ben was like, hey, Ryan, why don't you come do this with me? So it was a spur of the moment thing, and not, well thought out as you wanted people to believe.
It doesn't take a lot of time to think it out. It struck me.
Thought it out as soon as Ryan got here.
That it would be a good idea.
I think Ryan's left us.
Sad. But in that case, without getting into what the context was in that video, which is about like when like a fetus becomes a baby.
Okay, we're not gonna talk too much about that. It was Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
And then after they showed the Ben Shapiro clip, Ben was like, how could somebody talk so loudly and yet be so wrong?
Did
something
I say that?
like that. It was something like that.
I think the joke was just like, oh, he's speaking so he's talking so fast, he sounds so confident, he must be right. But in any case, so I think it's better with sand anyway. So so how many grains of sand does it take to be a heap? And you say, if you say, surely if you have like just 2 grains of sand next to each other on the ground, that's not a heap. But if you have 1 million grains of sand, clearly it is. And say, okay, how many grains of sand do you need to make a heap? And it would sound really funny if you said, oh, it's exactly 3,245 grains of sand is how many you have to give a heap. If you only have 3,244, it's not a heap.
The idea is, if you have 1 grain of sand, is this a heap? Okay, you add 1 grain of sand to it. Is this a heap? No. Well, what have you learned from that? That adding 1 grain of sand to something that's not a heap will not make it a heap. So you keep adding one, and because you're adding one, you're never making a heap. But eventually you have something that you are forced to admit is a heap. But we said that adding 1 grain of sand did not make a heap. So at what point did this change from not heap to heap?
Yeah, so when you think about why it would sound ridiculous to say that it's exactly 3,245 grains of sand is how many you have to have a heap, that, if you only have 3,244,
that's not a heap.
That it's not a heap. Then it's very easy to get out of that example, the principle, it must be that 1 grain more or less can't make the difference between a heap and not a heap. It has to be more than one.
And then you might say, which I think you were referring to somebody saying in the chat, well, I don't know, which is a totally reasonable thing to say, that, well, I don't know when it turns over, but obviously at some point it did, but I don't know when. Okay, well, just the fact that you don't know, that's not the relevant point. The relevant point is that at some point it must have, and that itself is bizarre. Even if you can't say when it was, it must have been some time, and any time that it happens, you're still saying that 1 grain makes that much of a difference.
Yeah. It seems bizarre to say that 1 grain can make a difference between a heap and not a heap. But then if you say 1 grain can't make a difference, then you have the problem that Jim was saying earlier. Like
you have 10 million grains of sand and it's still not a heap.
Exactly. So like in this book,
he's reading from his own. Are you going to read from your own book?
Okay. That'd be really weird. But I will flash it on the screen like this. So if in that book, give them an argument.
That's his second book there next to it.
It is. In that
available
book,
for pre-order.
That very true. Comes out on May 1st. But in the first one, the example that I used to illustrate this was about hair. So I said, you imagine our friend Dan Corrigan, who was bald, and you imagine.
Is he though?
I would say so, wouldn't you?
Well, that's the question.
Okay, so
come on, Ben.
But you start with Dan Corrigan's head of hair, and you finish with like Fabio's head of hair, and you say. So you do.
Fabio's probably bald by now, isn't he? Like 80?
Okay, well, classic Fabio, right? So, not not like in Corrigan's case, not hereditary baldness. It's just it's just shaved.
Or but, you have a very full head of hair.
Yeah. So you start out with Corrigan's head of hair. You add a hair. Is he still bald? Yeah, surely, right? Or if you just take somebody who not like Corrigan, but somebody with literally 0 hairs on their head, you add a hair, is he still bald? Yeah, clearly, given the way we use the word bald, we'd say is bald. You add another one, is he still bald? Yes. And if you take this principle that 1 hair more or less can't make a difference, then you could get all the way up to me or Fabio or whatever and say, oh, still bald, because you've just applied that principle like a million times in a row. But
Ben is clearly not bald.
Yeah, so something has gone wrong here. So the paradox is that on the one hand, it seems intuitively absurd to say that 1 hair more or less could make a difference to being bald or not bald. But then if 1 hair can't make a difference, then we have these even more absurd consequences like I'm bald. All right. So one thing that you get out of that's relevant to a bunch of other cases, but is that you don't because philosophers disagree among each other a lot about what to make of these issues about borderline applications of vague predicates. So borderline applications of vague predicates would be like somebody who's like right on the edge between bald and not bald, and say, okay, is there even a fact about whether they're bald or not bald? Is it just a matter of that we don't know something? Is this just a matter of knowledge? Is this a matter of the vagueness of language? Is there some weird sense in which things can be objectively vague? But
do you want to go back to the Ship of Theseus?
Yeah, well, I was just about to get there. But this could help you out, right? If your strong intuition about the Ship of Theseus is no, it's not the same ship at the end of the year, this could help you out with that problem about when it flipped over from the ship of Theseus existing to being a new ship, because one thing that, even though there's so much disagreement about what to make of these problems about borderline applications of vague predicates, one thing everybody has thought about this agrees on is that you don't want to commit the continuum fallacy. The continuum fallacy is when you say, well, there's like a gray area in the middle between the clearly bald and clearly not bald cases, or clearly a heap and clearly not a heap cases. Therefore, there's no real difference, or there aren't clear cases on both sides. So you could say the same thing maybe about the Ship of Theseus. You could say it's definitely not the Ship of Theseus at the end of the year.
You're getting out of the picture.
It's definitely the Ship of Theseus at the.
You can sit close to me. It's okay. We're married.
At the beginning of the year, when does it flip over exactly? It's vague. It's a gray area, but that's okay, right? Like that's consistent with all that. Or you could say it is still the Ship of Theseus at the end of the year. It's like my hand is still the same hand I had 10 years ago.
But how can that be the Ship of Theseus when there are no original parts left? Nothing on this ship now went to the sea with Theseus. So how can it be the same ship? And a lot of my students talk about that when they're answering this question. They talk about not experiences the way that we have experiences, obviously, but that these planks did not have the experience of Ben. That's so low class. They did not have the experience of being at sea with Theseus. The ship does not have, and they use the word spirit a lot. The ship does not have the spirit that that Theseus's ship had. And I don't think they're talking about spooky stuff. You know, they're talking about, what are they talking about? They're talking about, I
don't know what they're talking about.
No, I do, but I don't know if I can explain it very well.
Well, but again, so I mean, I understand that impulse, but I think there's also
I actually like that impulse a lot.
Okay. All right. But you could also just say, hey, look, if we all agree that even though none of the cells in my hand right now had the spirit of like the cells in my hand 10 years ago, it's clearly still my hand. So that gives us some reason to think that it is still a Ship of Theseus.
Well, your hand is a little different though, isn't it? Because it's attached to the rest of you, whereas the Ship of Theseus is a standalone item.
Okay, so I understand that.
I'm just saying that's a thing you could say.
That is a thing you could say. I'm not sure how much I'd accept that though, because I think that even though it's attached to you, in the scenario where my hand was just chopped off and they did like whatever amazing science fiction thing they did to grow me a new hand and then attach it to me. Hand's attached to me, but we would still say it's not the original hand, it's a new hand. So all of which is to say that the example that we just gave, the Ship of Theseus classic.
Yes, like memory. Like the memory is not in those planks. Those planks didn't have the experience. They don't have that there's got to be a word out there that I'm not thinking of, but memory, that's a good way of thinking about it.
So that's hard enough, but what if you're pretty sure one way or the other, you know what you think?
Yeah, so take a second. Is that the Ship of Theseus or is it not? So get your answer. We're
going to give everybody a minute here to it's like there's an old movie that our
think about it while Ben talks.
Wow.
This is like the tick tock on a game show. Like Ben talking.
Wow.
Go ahead.
This is what I have to put up with. There's a movie from the 70s called The Beast Must Die. It's like this it's this movie that was made to be shown in drive-ins. And it has, and it's something I think my friend Les found in a, like back when, I'm very old, back when they had video stores and they had like a bin of like $1 VHSs, they had like like movies that they were like getting rid of, like that they weren't renting out anymore. You know, they'd be in this like dollar bin at Video to Go and Lansing. I promise this is a thing that exists. This existed, you know, obviously.
Doric, that's my kind of joke. That's the kind of joke I tell Ben.
That video store, like nearly all video stores, has ceased to exist because we live in a sad world. But this movie had, so yeah, probably in like the early 2000s sometime, you know, Fred found it in this dollar VHS bin and we watched it. It was,
what is it called?
The Beast Must Die.
I've never heard of it.
And so the premise is that there are a bunch of people who've been invited by this wealthy eccentric to his remote estate, and that
all good movies take place on a remote estate.
And they announce at the beginning, he announces when he gathers them together that he knows that one of them is a werewolf, but he doesn't know who. And
this can't be that hard to figure out.
The best thing about it, though, is that like 3/4 through, they tell you at the beginning of the movie that they're going to do this. 3/4 of the way through the movie, because this was made to be shown in drive-ins, they have something they actually call a werewolf break, where the action pauses so everybody can like open up their windows and yell out who they think the werewolf is.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this is the werewolf break and the Beast Must Die is what I was thinking of with this. You know, this is like the shit, you know, the Theseus break, you know, decide whether you think that the original ship is the ship or not.
All right, that was your werewolf break. Well, the consequences could be that if Theseus comes back and says, I want my ship, is he entitled to the ship that's there?
Yeah. So
ownership is
ownership could definitely be a consequence.
Or is this ship even worth saving anymore?
Sure, it could be like that the Ship of Theseus has historical importance.
Yeah, but once all the planks have been replaced, does this ship matter in that sense anymore, or is it now just the ship? All
right, now whatever you think about that.
Hi Ryan, you're back.
So whatever you think about that, here is, much like the trolley problem, a second version designed to screw with your intuitions about the first one. Same setup. Everything's the same. They're taking out one of the
rotting planks.
You know, every day they take out one of the perfectly good planks and replace it. Actually, in this case, it better be perfectly good planks, or it doesn't.
No,
work.
They're rotting planks, but then they're treated.
Okay, so they take away in this version. So you know everything is exactly the same as the first version, but with a twist.
That all of these planks have been saved in a shed by who is it? A robot that's going out to get what's happening. Whoever this is, they've saved all the planks in the shed, and one day they put the ship back together in exactly the same configuration that it was before. Now, if you said that the ship after all the planks had been replaced, yes, this is Theseus's ship. Well, how about now? Is it still Theseus's ship? I mean, if it is, then this ship that's been built out of the old planks, it can't be, because they can't both be Theseus's ship. He only left one ship behind. And if he comes back and says, I want my ship, he's not going to then receive two ships. So, yeah. And how can whether that is Theseus's ship or not depend on the existence of some other ship? Like, it is Theseus's ship unless we've built a new ship, or we've built a ship out of the planks and then it's not Theseus's ship. That seems really weird.
Yeah. By the way, you'd be surprised. Read Plato's dialogues. I swear I'm not making this up. He has a surprising number of robot examples. Not kidding about that. That was it Daedalus who's supposed to be making the special statues that can walk around on their own.
We must not have read the same.
No, I swear to God, this is in there.
That's fine. I'm just saying.
Not making this up.
Okay.
But, Ryan, back me up.
It's not what I learned in my Plato class, but you know.
Yeah. So one way to just kind of slow this down a little bit, like what Jen just said, to see the problem with this 2-ship version. So like at the end of the year, fine, let's put them in the harbor. There are 2 ships floating next to each other in the harbor. One of which is is the same one that you ended up with at the end of the first version.
Mm-hmm.
The other of which is the reassembled old planks. And there
maybe neither of these is the Ship of Theseus.
Yeah, so,
that's another option too.
So let's get to that, right? But like if you think like the first 2 options, right, is the one made of old planks the ship, is the one made of new planks the ship. Well, there's a kind of case that you can make intuitively thinking about analogies for either one of those. Like the case for thinking that the ship made of new planks is the original ship is the same one that it was in the first case. So you could have like analogies like the hand analogy that we did earlier, or there are at least equally intuitive ways of thinking about why the original one might be, right? Like if you are moving across country and you have a bicycle and you want to ship it to yourself, like in the mail across the country,
you have to take it apart.
Yeah, you
have to disconnect every piece
it's
from all other pieces, and then you put it in a big box and you ship it.
Yeah, it's not like you would just have like a giant box, fill it with packing peanuts.
I don't smell or anything. You can sit closer
and then drop the entire bicycle in there as is. You'd take it apart and put it back together, and then like.
Isn't that still your bicycle?
When you get it on the other end, you put it back together. Surely that's still the original bicycle.
Mm-hmm. I would say yes.
So, and even if you think in the first example that the ship at the end of the year is the original ship, you might really hesitate when you think about the version where there are the 2 ships floating next to each other in the harbor. And so if you think, okay, here are 4 possible things you could say about this. Ship made of old planks is the ship. Ship made of new planks is the ship. Seems like you can make a good case for both of those. So then we can round off the list of options with both and neither. And neither is a little weird. And to see why it's a little weird, and Jen kind of mentioned this earlier, right? But just to kind of underline and circle the point, like if you were inclined to think that the ship at the end of the year was the original ship in the first example, then it'd be really weird if you were going to say neither purely because there was this other ship. Or if...
Yeah, but if you thought it wasn't,
okay, well,
then you can also say, oh, well, this one's not either.
Yeah, although...
And that would work out fine.
Although, even if you thought it wasn't, it would be a little weird to say that...
he wouldn't bother to do that.
Even if you thought it wasn't, like, you might still think that if it were just taken apart and then put back together again, then that would be the original ship. So
the thing that seems the weirdest, though, is to base your answer in the original question on whether or not this other thing is in existence.
And
because why would that, why does that matter? I mean, if you don't know that, if you say, you have the first example, if you have the first example and you say, okay, is this the Ship of Theseus? Are you going to be like, now wait, I need to know what happened to the planks before you can answer? Then that seems kind of weird.
Yeah. So one way to think about this, and actually, let's just make sure, since we are going to have to end in a few minutes for part 1, we will do part 2. But two things to...
Nothing is more important to me than this right here.
So 2 quick points about this. So you might think, all right, there's a case to be made for ship made of old planks being the original ship. There's a case to be made for the ship made of new planks being the original ship. And it seems you might think it's like a little arbitrary. It's kind of hard to pick. And neither seems a little weird for all the reasons we've been talking about. So you might think, well, look, both of them are the original ship. There we go. I solved it. But the problem with that is that is actually the only option we can rule out just as a matter of pure logic. because there's
because then the world will explode.
Yes, that's right. It's exactly like a robot in an old movie where you give it a contradiction and it starts shaking back and forth and then it blows up. There's a principle in math and logic called the transitivity of identity, which says that if
everybody drink when Ben starts talking about logic.
If x equals y and y equals z, then x equals z. That's the transitivity of identity. So if you take like this this charging case for AirPods, call it Bob.
Aren't we fancy?
Call it Bob. Right? This is Bob, my charging case for AirPods. All right.
Oh, I'm never gonna forget this.
All right. Now here's Jim, charging case for AirPods. Now here's Jane, charging case for AirPods.
Feels nice to have a girl.
Well, yeah, a little gender, representational, equity here. So if Bob and Jim are the same charging case, and if Jim and Jane are the same charging case, then logically Bob and Jane have to be the same charging case. That's the transitivity of identity. So
even I knew that.
So, you know what? I am going to read from this.
Oh no!
As pretentious as it is, I'm going to read from this.
So
in fact, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have you read from it.
Okay.
So read this.
Less bad.
Read this part.
Oh, come on. This is really.
The book is dedicated to her, and and I refer to her in that dedication.
No, if you're gonna read it, you gotta read. If you're gonna tell them, you gotta read the whole thing.
To my beautiful wife Jennifer, among her many virtues, she's the best logic instructor that I know. She taught tons of symbolic logic classes. She's really, really good at it. This is shtick right now, but in any case.
And this is Ryan's cover.
Yeah, he drew that image of David Hume hushing Ben Shapiro. Which actually I'll credit where credit's due. Dave Smith, who's somebody I do not agree with at all politically, but when I was on his show right after the book came out, he was holding that up and he said, yes, this is David Hume hushing Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro depicted actual size. Tell
them what David Feldman said. Don't you remember?
You mean that? Are you talking
about the dedication? Feldman
didn't say anything. You're thinking of Nader.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Tell them what he said.
Yeah, Ralph Nader. I was on the Ralph Nader radio hour, and Nader started out like asking as like an icebreaker. He's like, I can't do the Nader voice, but he says, you say it's about this like, sort of cold, rigorous pursuit of logic, but then why do you start your book with "To my beautiful wife Jennifer," who blah blah blah? And I told him because it's true. But in any case. In any case, so hello, Shabazz. Cat's climbing up on my knee.
And the best cat.
So,
no, this isn't Michael's book. This is Ben's book.
Yeah, give them an argument. Michael's book is against the web. You should read that too. In any case, other thing. So the option that sounds the most appealing is the one that just as a matter of logic we know actually can't be true. So this is a really hard problem. And the last...
Wait, does that sound the most appealing?
Does to me. Your mileage may vary. But otherwise it sounds the most appealing to me because I can really feel the tug of saying that the ship made of old planks is the original ship. I can really feel the tug of saying the ship made of new planks is the original ship.
Both at the same time.
Yeah. But so if we just got to have our cake and eat it too and say both, that sounds kind of nice to me. But
I just don't understand how first you have one ship and then you have two and they're the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right to me at all.
Well, okay, but I think the reason it doesn't sound right to you is basically that like this sort of intuitive feeling that doesn't sound right is basically the same logical problem we've been talking about.
No, I think why it's intuitively doesn't sound right is first you have one and then you have two. Like, how does one ship split into two entire ships?
Okay. I would argue that that's the same thing because you're saying, well, how can two of them both be the same one? Which I think
I would say that one is not equal to two. Is that how that?
This still sounds to me.
No, it doesn't. It's not the same.
It still
thing.
sounds to me like two different ways of saying the same thing.
Because you don't understand me.
Okay. Wow. All right. This got grim. This, she was being so loving like a minute ago, and then it just.
That's because you were being loving, and then you said you didn't understand me, so that all went down the drain.
Sounds all right. Well, all right. Just that's what you get for an expression of philosophical disagreement. But in any case, so since it is 8, and I do have to go, last thing to say to tease next week when we do part 2 is that you can do, so if you read like Derek Parfit's papers about this stuff, you can do examples that are structurally just like this, but for people. So, for example, you're going into, you imagine not implausibly that medical science eventually gets good enough that if you have...
No, don't tell them. You teased that.
Just a quick one. I think this sounds like...
Is that what you were about to say? Just a quickie?
I think this still counts as a teaser.
Okay.
Movie
trailers now, they do tell you the whole movie. So
this
I
is
guess
the whole movie.
Ahead.
This is like a trailer showed you one small scene at the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
So medical science gets good enough that you have brain cancer or something that can just grow a new part of the brain to stick in there and cut out the cancerous part. And so it's neuron by neuron, exactly the same. You're going to have all the same experiences once it's been replaced and all that. And so Parfit's samples, all right, let's say like 40% of your brain was taken out and replaced.
See, you're telling too much. I just want to say that I am not from the Midwest. I am from Texas, where we shoot people. So he's from the Midwest. That's not what I was.
I know.
Okay.
I just put it up. Yeah. Okay. Put it up because I enjoyed it.
Because it's Ryan.
And also because I enjoyed the comment.
But yes, do not accuse me of being Midwest nice.
I'm Midwest nice.
I'm not.
Jen is Texas vicious.
I am.
So
you should meet my mother.
So in any case, so we will talk about the people version of these problems. That's the personal identity half of Ship of Theseus and personal identity. Next week, same time, same place. Tune in there. Left is best.
Team Snoopy forever.